Alright, I am going to be doing a review on the Millennium Falcon. So, this set released in October of 2019 for a retail price of $170, and the set retired in December of 2024. But you could still pick up the set for about the retail price. And this has set number 75257, 1,351 pieces, 7 minifigures, and an age rating of 9+. So, these are the 7 figures. And to be honest, there are only really 2 notable ones. So, first up, the droids. So we get just an R2-D2, C-3PO, and a D-O. And the R2-D2 and C-3PO aren't anything special. They were incredibly common figures. They came in so many sets, so there's not really too much to talk about them. While their printing doesn't look terrible, they're just definitely outclassed by the newer variations. Mainly with the newer R2-D2s now having a backprint, which this one did not include. And the same thing goes for the C-3PO, just on a much higher level. Because newer ones have arm printing, a far better torso print, and sometimes even a dual molded leg. But that is still pretty rare. And the D-O is okay. He does have some pretty good printing on him. I definitely find the little guy a bit cute, but he's just not super exciting. Nor is he exclusive. We also get Chewbacca and Finn. And same thing goes for this Chewbacca. He is an incredibly common figure. There's just not too much notable about him, really. He's not terrible, just not super interesting. However, the Finn is a pretty good figure. He has a very nice print on his torso for his tan shirt and nougat vest, which looks pretty good, and he even has some very nice leg printing. And I do appreciate how he included a satchel and a very nice face print. And this is the second face, with a bit more of a scary expression. And while not a bad figure, it's just not super exciting, and plus, this figure did come in another set. But the 2 most interesting figures are the old Lando Calrissian and Bulio. First up, Bulio. So he has a very nice print on his torso and legs for a nice nougat jumpsuit, which looks pretty good. And the figure includes this very intricate molded head, which looks very nice. It has some great printing for his eyes and mouth, and even the horns are made of a bit more of a rubbery material so that they don't snap off. It is just kind of a shame what happened to him. Now for the Lando Calrissian. And the old Lando is definitely a very good figure. He has a very nice print on his torso for his yellow shirt, which looks very nice. There is even a bit of a bandolier going across. But I do wish he included some sort of leg printing. And his face print does look very nice. I do like how they put a bit of gray hair on his mustache and eyebrows to make him look a bit old. And the figure does include the pretty nice widow's peak hairpiece, and a pretty good second face. And my personal favorite thing with this figure is his cape, because it is actually a double-sided cape. One side is blue, and the other side is black, which is definitely very cool because we don't really get that too often. And his collar is also double-sided, which is even less common. But I mean, overall, this is a decent minifigure selection. None of the figures are terrible, it's just these 4 are not that interesting. However, I am a fan of these figures. But now, let's get on to the actual build. I will say, this is probably the best playscale version of a Millennium Falcon. And I'm not including the Dark Millennium Falcon, obviously. So, all of the ship's panels do look very nice. There are barely any gaps throughout the ship. There's only a couple of very small ones. And the detailing on top of the panels do look pretty nice. I guess to some people it could look a bit messy because of all of those tan and dark red bits that are kind of scattered across the builds. I could see some people wanting a more clean Millennium Falcon. And right there, you might have noticed those 6 vents. And they do look okay. I'm just not a fan how they chose that round Technic thing. They definitely should have used a round 3x3 tile. And there are 4 slopes. And LEGO actually used that paint roller piece to add some detail. And the front panels also look pretty good. There is, of course, the radar dish, which you can actually move around. And it can move around a bit. It can stamp off very easily, though. But it does have a lot of nice posability. And there's a sticker right there to replicate some blaster marks. And this is the other side. And there is all this middle section, which looks pretty good. And you can actually lift it up to access the interior. But I will show you that later. And right here, there is the little ridge thing that leads to the cockpit. And they do use some stickers, which is okay, but I wish some of them were prints. And my issue with these stickers is that they are light gray, and the light gray stickers just don't match the bricks very well. And there is, of course, this whole section, which goes across. And there are some more vents. And all of the greebling on the sides do look very nice. I feel like they did a pretty good job, and even the engines. They did do a pretty good job on the engine. It's just, I kind of wish that they used light blue bricks instead of white bricks. I feel like that just would have looked a bit better. And they do use this entire long bar piece, which looks pretty good. There are, of course, the two front spire type things. And they do look pretty good, but as you can see, they're not entirely symmetrical. They do have some slight color variation, which to me is okay, but I could definitely see some people finding that a bit annoying. And the detailing on the sides do look pretty nice, and there are some nice vents. And same detailing goes for the other side, and same vents. But there are actually two spring-loaded shooters. The other one is on the other side. And to fire them, you just push down in the front little vent, and then they fire. And I do like how the spring-loaded shooter isn't in your face. It is a bit hidden. And in between them, there is that whole little tile area. And in between the two, there are those rails and that whole plate. And I'm not entirely sure what those are for. I guess I could see the top one being a nice little rail for this to slide on when you're opening it. But I'm not sure what the bottom one is for. I guess that if you wanted, you could try to build the little escape pod, like how it's on the original Millennium Falcon. The whole cockpit area does look pretty nice. There is a nice print for the windshield and that, which looks pretty good. And luckily, unlike the last Millennium Falcon, the print actually matches the bricks. And to open the cockpit, you just take this whole thing off. And you can fit two figures. Technically three. You can put Dio on that little jumper right there, and the other two just fit in like that. But it is a bit of a tight fit, which is why I usually like to only have one character in the cockpit. And they do look pretty good when you put the cockpit back on. And there is, of course, the incredibly common LEGO Star Wars control panel, but there is actually a unique sticker right there, which I do appreciate. And the figures do look pretty good when you put the windshield back on. And if you're curious, this is what the underside of the ship looks like. It's not nearly as pretty as the top, but I mean, it didn't really have to be. You can definitely see a lot of Technic and plates. But there is actually a turret at the bottom. Of course, the 4 points of landing gear, and they all hold up the ship very well, because they are actually attached by some Technic. But an issue I have is if you have had this thing displayed on a shelf for a while, the landing gear can get very dirty. And at the top, there's a little turret which you can move around, and you can move this thing a bit, but not too much because if you try to lift it, the whole thing just lifts up. And there's a nice sticker right there to replicate a windshield. And you can actually open this entire thing up and take out this whole thing, which you can put in two figures just like that, and you can easily slide them in. But one thing that does kind of suck is that both Bulio and Chewbacca both cannot fit in the turret, because both of their heads prevent them from going all the way in. And in case you were curious, this is what the inside looks like. But now, let's get on to the actual interior. So to open the interior, it is pretty simple. You lift this thing out, and all the panels up, which is pretty cool. But first up, the front area. So right here, there is a little couch area with some seating for 3 figures, and even a little hollow chest table, which is very cool. And it is actually a printed shield piece. There is a pretty nice control panel right there, and a very cool looking seat, which can recline and both spin around. And over here, all there is just a little crate. And at the back, there are 2 beds right there, a very cool looking hyperdrive, and a whole kitchen area with a stove, a red mug, and even a chair. And there is that very cool flexible 2-piece, and another crate, which is just empty. And right here, you can actually lift up the floorboards to store a figure inside, which is a pretty cool spot to hide some figures. And over here, there is actually the ramp to get in and out of the ship, but there isn't really enough space for a figure to easily walk up there. And on the other side, there is actually a little area right there and a little wrench. And I believe that is essentially it. But would I recommend that you pick up the set? I mean, if you have been looking to buy a Millennium Falcon, then this is definitely not a bad option. If you don't really care too much, obviously go for the Dark Millennium Falcon. That one is just way funnier and has way cooler figures. But if you want one based off of the movies, this one is probably going to be your best bet. Because the build looks great, and the set isn't that outrageously overpriced. I know that it is a Rise of Skywalker set, and that movie sucked, but the build is still great. But if you have unlimited money to spend, then obviously go for the UCS one. But overall, I'll give the set about a 9 out of 10.